Washington Park. And the tennis center said, the tennis city of Atlanta said, you take them all or you don't get any of them. They lasted about 6 years, Universal Tennis Academy, I'll call them out. So I'm used to lobbying because as an educator in career and technical education, we had to lobby for things. And we're still doing that for McGee and Washington Park. I have asked for landscaping. Well, they'll throw out a little stuff, but it's not what we need. And as you know, the Beltline is there now. The Beltline stops right now at Washington Park. So do a little traveling around Asheville Heights and Washington Park. You would be surprised at what's going on. But the Tennis Association throughout the years has supported Wink's tennis program. As a matter of fact, I introduced Wink to the West Side Future Fund Summit. Look that up on Google also. Trying to get funds, he needed funds to transport the children to the US Open. And I said, Wink, they meet at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Friday, first and third Fridays. You gotta get up. And he did, he came, and I introduced him to a company that provided support. I'll just say, we eat a lot of chicken sandwiches. There's one on Martin Luther King now. But it worked, because then Arthur Blank and the West Side people had a concert. And guess who the artist was? Bruno Mars. Wink and I went free. So I convinced him, I think I sold him on that. I said, Wink, I didn't know you could dance. Wink was getting up, dancing and stuff, but he had a good time. And in April of this year, I said, I made a mistake and I purchased 2 tickets for the Billie Jean King qualifying rounds in Asheville, North Carolina. I said, dog, I don't want to waste this ticket. So I said, I know who I'll call. I said, Wink, you want to go to the Billie Jean King Cup? He said, in Asheville. See, it's only 2 hours from Winston-Salem. He said, yeah. And so we drove. We had a good time listening to old R&B CDs. But anyway, that was my Wink. And all the remarks that have been said about his structure and how he taught the children is ditto for me. Because he was a Morehouse man, let me put it that way, okay? And imagining traveling with 30 to 40 students in a van to New York. Takes special people to do that. Like Terry said, he couldn't do children. I taught adults and children, so it takes a special person to do that. And lately, I've also learned that we have a kindred relationship. Wink's father, Mr. Fulton, was in agriculture. So was my father. His mother was an English professor. So was my mother. So we shared a lot of similar things. And I'm going to, as I said in Winston-Salem, I'm going to miss my friend. But we can take with us some of the things we all experienced with Wink. Now, he knew food. He could go around like Unity and K&K. I said, K&K, where is that, Wink? He said, it's on Bankhead. Yeah. So I said, okay, we'll go. But his lessons were life lessons. His recipe for teaching tennis involved learning the rules of the game: racket tension, physical stamina, technique, footworks, and so forth. Just as in life, we learn the rules for civic engagement, education, employment, etc., and navigating the obstacles. Wink was my Google. Now, I can use the computer. I programmed the Apple IIe back in 1985, so I'm computer literate. But anyway, if I needed to search the history of black tennis in the early years, I just go to Wink. And lately, I learned that one of my classmates at Hampton was Arthur Ashe's doubles partner, Art Cummings. And he has written a book, and he didn't tell me to do this. He didn't know I was going to do this. But if you go online, the book is for sale. And you'd be surprised at all the history of blacks playing tennis. Now, Washington Park and McGee gets ignored, but it's not going to be ignored too much longer because of the influx of people coming to Atlanta. And Ms. Jackson, I was born at McLendon Hospital. There's history in Atlanta other than Martin Luther King, and that's not to sound ugly. I hope you don't take that the wrong way. But there's history in Atlanta that's going to fade if we don't pass it on to the youth. And Wink had that patience to deal with the children. I could talk to him on the phone and I'd hear him saying, "Did you pick up your rackets? Did you get the rackets?" And I'd hear the response, "No." He said, "Well, you can't leave till you do your part." And that was Wink. So I would like to recite this poem that I think describes the unselfish acts of William Finley Wink Fulton Jr. And you'll recognize some of the verses, I'm sure. "Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream. For the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thy art to dust returneth, what's not spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow finds us farther than today. Art is long and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating, funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb-driven cattle, be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant, let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and guard overhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing, with a heart for any fate, still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait.
Thank you, and I think Councilman Bond is coming forward for another brief presentation.
I'd like to say good afternoon to the members of the distinguished clergy, the Fulton family, the friends, the loved ones, the mentees, the students, the friends of Coach Wink. I'm Atlanta City Council member Michael Julian Bond, and I had the distinct honor and pleasure of attending Morehouse College with Coach Wink. Though he's slightly older than I am, but often in our interactions from that time to present, you know, Wink had kind of an Obi-Wan Kenobi kind of air to him when we would be together. He had the distinction of coaching my children, my daughter Michael, my son Skylar at Washington Park, and sometimes at McGee. And often when I would see him at the park, at Washington Park, we would have long conversations. We would have he would give long dissertations. He would comment on the world in such a way, and in Atlanta, not just around tennis, but around the culture, what was going on in the city, so often that I would forget, as a native myself, that Wink himself was not a native Atlanta. And so he was a dear friend, and we tried to give him, from the political point of view, what as possible as we could give. The onerous, infamous tennis contract was mentioned that really destroyed some of the legacy that had been built up at McGee and Washington Park. And so the city is now in the way of correcting that and making sure that those two centers are just as functional, just as active, and have just as many resources as Bitsy Grant or some of the others. We actually had a conversation last week in the Community Development Committee about the scourge of pickleball infecting Washington Park. And so I would appreciate it, if I could be political for half a moment, if you would let the Parks Department know exactly how you feel about it. Because I made no bones about telling the Commissioner of Parks and Recreation that it was culturally troubling to have pickleball played at Washington Park. And I don't think that Wink would have appreciated it either. Matter of fact, his predecessor, we actually had a conversation about that, and I mentioned it to his predecessor. There's a new commissioner now that's only been there about 4 months. So if you can, pardon me, Pastor, if you all can give them as much hell about that as possible, your council member would appreciate it. But to the matter at hand, there have been so many great words and great sharing about Wink that has already been done. I don't want to belabor it because I'm actually more here in my official capacity than as a friend. But I will tell you that as a friend, I mean, we loved him dearly, loved him deeply, and he often gave me wise counsel that I followed and implemented in my professional capacity. And he was just a great guy to be around. You know, there are a lot of people who could tell stories, who could talk, who could go on and on. And sometimes there's weight to the length of how you're listening to it. It becomes a burden. But it was never a burden with Wink. It was never a burden. It was always helpful, always instructive, and always welcome. But to that point, also at that same meeting 2 weeks ago, some of us on the city council introduced legislation to create a commission to honor the memory and legacy of Coach Wink Fulton. It passed unanimously out of committee 2 weeks ago. And it is anticipated that at our January 3rd meeting, when the legislation moves to the full body of the Atlanta City Council, that it would also pass unanimously. And so we're hoping to impanel that committee as soon as the mayor signs the legislation, and that we will that commission will come together to bring us recommendations back on how best to honor Coach Wink permanently within the city of Atlanta. And so as I take my seat, I just want to again extend my condolences to the Fulton family and just let you know that even though to be absent from the body, I'm going to trample on your territory a little bit, Reverend. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But what people don't consider is what goes on beyond that statement. So if you are present with the Lord and God is everywhere, and if you're present with the Lord, then you're everywhere too. So Coach Wink is not gone. Coach Wink is here with us in spirit. And so never feel, even though physically he may not be here, look at the extension of the love of the people whose lives he's affected. You know, he was like a great tree in our community, providing shade, shelter. And you know, because of the age of trees, not everyone who appreciates that tree or has taken shelter at a tree ever might not necessarily interact. But if you look at we often get caught up in the height of the tree or want to play in the branches of the tree, but we never stop to consider the roots, how far or deep the roots of that tree go. And I'll tell you something that we learned at Morehouse from Dean Carter. If you all would look to your right, look to your left, those are the roots of Coach Wink. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Jeff, I know you, would you like to come say something? Okay, for sure.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry for my tie. I came straight from work. Traffic caught me. I didn't think it was. But anyway, I'm Coach Wink's, as Cece said, little big brother, because I've always been protective of him, even when we were kids. So it just has grown since then. But I'm here to talk about Coach Wink's NJTL, and I'm going to be brief, but I can't really talk about it without going back. I think actually in the beginning, Coach Wink's NJTL originally really started in North Carolina when our first coach, David Lash, had Wink give his first lesson of chaperone kids on the court, because he actually chaperoned me, coached me, because I was part of the younger group, and of course he was the older group. So through that, I saw him, and then once we got with Kimberly Park Tennis Association, and he was a chaperone of the main chaperones there as a high school student. We're talking high school, we're not even talking college. Making sure that we did what we were supposed to do. Wink was honing what morphed into Coach Wink back 70s and 80s. So it actually started out, Wink's program was called Positive Strokes, then it went to Positive Works. And my experience with it was before, I came to Morehouse, and the only reason I came to Morehouse was I was following my brother. I just tell it, my dad knows it, but I'm following Wink because I should have gone where I finished up, and that's North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in Greensboro, North Carolina, East Market Street. So, so with that one, I love my time at Morehouse, but more than anything, I love my time with my brother. And then, back then, he showed me, because in addition to that, he had me working at McGee Tennis Center when I was here, but Wink actually taught his first lesson at Washington Park. So my experience with him in tennis in Atlanta was at Washington Park when I went to Club Candlewood, that apartment on Washington Road. I'd go in the summers. He taught me the MARTA schedule, to ride the MARTA by myself to Washington Park, and of course, that was well before Washington Park area looks like it does now. It was kind of a little bit rougher, to where I'm walking down the street by myself from Little Winston-Salem, North Carolina, going to Washington Park, but I made it there safely, and I always made it back safely. But also, it just showed how his program kept growing and growing, because I was there when Wink would go pick up, I was at Morehouse when Wink would pick up Eric Fresh and the Gibson brothers and everybody from Phyllis Wheatley YWCA to go play tennis. So I know Eric and all of that, and my thing was that I'm tired of sharing. I started getting tired of sharing my brother because I'm the little brother. I'm supposed to get everything, but I had to learn, even when I transferred back to North Carolina A&T and I would come down to Morehouse, a lot of times I'd go to his house, I'd see, at one point it was Eric, Chris, Judah. They're laid out in his on his floor, sleep, because they're waiting to get up and go to McGee Tennis Center on a Saturday morning to go play tennis literally all day. And a lot of days, I'm like, we're gonna get together, and me and my brother gonna hang out. Well, no, it's gonna be me, my brother, Judah, Marvin, Gene, and he had a lot of them. He had a few that were really close, and they're like my little brothers also. And that's, of course, Drell, and I don't know if Eugene is not here, Eugene Holiday. Of course, Rembert, who we affectionately sometimes called Slimbert. But I just know, and there were many more than them, but those are the ones who I just say were constantly, I knew whenever I saw my brother, one of them was gonna be around. So fast forward, just seeing him, I used to come down in the summers and I used to tell my dad, I go to McGee Tennis Center and I look, and I'm like, I know our program was big, but McGee Tennis Center has 9 courts. We would have at least 10 kids on each court and knew every one of them's name, had a little special thing with them, so all of this thing proceeded to build. And kind of to fast forward, he was at McGee for a while and he went back and forth to McGee in Washington Park, and then one time he was over at Morehouse and Morehouse's courts, he had Morehouse's courts full. So when it came back, that he came back to Washington Park, Coach Coxton, who was right along with him, I've never known a time in Atlanta that I didn't know the Coxton family. And so essentially now, that's like an extended part of my family also, because he ended up helping Brian, he went to Winston-Salem State, and a lot of Fridays I called and talked to my mama, who's there? Brian, doing his laundry and eating my fish. But anyway, so anyway, speaking of that, we fast forward to 2013, was when our mom died. So Coach Wink really spawned out of that, because I remember one of our trips coming back to Atlanta after that in the car. He had been to the U.S. Open a couple of times. And I just know one of my things, man, I just want to take kids to the U.S. Open. And I'm looking at him, yeah, how you going to do that? He didn't know, but all I know is one day he came to me in 2013 and said, we're going to the U.S. Open. And I just know, how you going to do that, man? What money we got? Oh, then I thought about it.